The stars outside the window of Earth Orbital Station Horizon looked like scattered diamonds against black silk. Yuna stood there, her hands pressed against the cold glass, watching cargo ships drift between the massive space docks. She had spent 7 years on this station. 7 years of hard work, late nights in the laboratory, and dreams shared with the man she loved. Do-hwan was late again. This was the 3rd time this week. She turned away from the window and looked around their small living quarters. It was not much a bed, a desk covered with her research papers, a tiny kitchen area, and a shelf filled with photographs of their life together. Her favorite picture showed them on graduation day at the United Earth Fleet Academy. They were so young then, so full of hope. Do-hwan had his arm around her shoulder, and they were both laughing at something Captain Jisoo had said. The door slid open, and Do-hwan walked in. He was tall and handsome, with sharp features and eyes that could charm anyone. But tonight, those eyes would not meet hers. "You missed dinner," Yuna said softly. "I made your favorite. I had a meeting." He loosened the collar of his uniform and sat on the edge of the bed. An important one. Yuna sat beside him. She could feel something was wrong. After 7 years together, she knew his moods better than her own. There was tension in his shoulders and a strange darkness in his expression. "What kind of meeting?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his words changed everything. "The Galactic Consulate offered me a position. The human liaison role. It is the most important diplomatic job in the galaxy." Yuna felt her heart lift with joy. "Do-hwan, that is wonderful. You have worked so hard for this. When do you—" "There is a condition." The happiness died in her chest. She waited. They do not allow candidates to have emotional connections with anyone in military research. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were cold. "They are afraid of security leaks. They think relationships create weakness." Yuna understood now. She understood, and the understanding felt like a knife sliding between her ribs. "So you have to choose," she whispered, "between me and the job." Do-hwan stood up and walked to the window where she had stood moments before. He stared out at the stars, his back to her. "I already chose." The words hung in the air like poison. Yuna could not breathe. She could not think. She could only stare at the back of the man she had loved for 7 years, the man she had given everything to, and wonder if she had ever truly known him at all. "I am sorry, Yuna, but this is my chance. My only chance. I cannot let it go." She found her voice somehow. "We can fight this. We can talk to them. I can leave my research position, and it is already done." He turned to face her, and there was no guilt in his eyes, only cold determination. "I reported that you shared classified xenobiology research with unauthorized sources. The security team will arrest you in the morning." The world stopped. Yuna stared at him, her mind refusing to accept what she was hearing. This could not be real. This had to be a nightmare. The man she loved, the man who had held her through dark nights and celebrated her victories and promised her forever. This man was destroying her life. You what?" It was the only way. His voice was calm, reasonable, as if he was explaining a simple problem. "If you are discredited, there is no connection between us that matters. The consulate will accept me. I will become the most powerful human in the galaxy." Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I have never shared classified research with anyone. You know that. You know me. I know that you would have held me back." He picked up a bag she had not noticed before, already packed, already ready. "One day you will understand. When humanity takes its rightful place among the stars, because of the connections I build, you will see that I made the right choice." He walked to the door. He did not look back. "Goodbye, Yuna." The door closed behind him, and Yuna was alone. She did not sleep that night. She sat on the floor of their quarters, his quarters no longer. Just hers now, just hers for a few more hours. And she tried to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. How the man who had kissed her good morning just 12 hours ago could betray her so completely. The security officers came at dawn. They were professional and cold, their faces showing no emotion as they placed restraints on her wrists and read her the charges. Unauthorized distribution of classified materials. Potential threat to Earth security. Possible collaboration with hostile alien species. All lies built by the man she had loved. They led her through the station corridors, and people she had worked with for years turned away from her. Some whispered behind their hands. Others pretended not to see her at all. In a single night, she had gone from respected scientist to suspected traitor. The detention cell was small and gray. There was a bed, a toilet, and nothing else. No windows to the stars she had studied all her life. No pictures of happier days. Just four walls and the weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest. Days passed. Weeks. The tribunal was scheduled, then delayed, then scheduled again. Yuna spent her time replaying every moment of her relationship with Dawan, searching for signs she had missed, warnings she had ignored. How could she have been so blind? She learned later that Dohan had left for the consulate homeworld the same morning she was arrested. He had not even waited to see if his plan worked. He was that confident. He was that cold. 3 months after her arrest, the door to her cell opened. An old man in an admiral's uniform stood there, his face lined with age but his eyes sharp and kind. "Admiral Tassung," she whispered. Her former mentor, the man who had first seen her potential when she was just a young cadet. "I know you did not do what they claim," he said. "I have spent weeks digging through every record, every communication, every piece of evidence. It was all fabricated. Cleverly done, but fabricated." Hope sparked in her chest for the first time in months. "You believe me?" "I have always believed you, Yuna. You are the most honest person I have ever known." He stepped aside, revealing the open corridor beyond. "The charges are dismissed. You are free." She walked out of the cell on shaking legs. Free. She was free. But as the relief washed over her, it was followed by something else. Something harder and colder. "What happens to Dowan?" she asked. Admiral Tassung's face darkened. "Nothing. He's beyond Earth's jurisdiction now. The consulate protects its members." He knew that when he did this. He planned it perfectly. Yuna stood in the corridor of the station where she had built her life, her career, her love. All of it was ash now. Her reputation was destroyed. Her research was compromised. Even if the charges were dismissed, the whispers would follow her forever. She was the woman who had been arrested for treason. That stain would never fully wash away. But as she stood there, something changed inside her. The pain did not disappear, but it transformed. It became fuel. It became fire. Dohan had thrown her away because he thought she was weak. He had thought that his ambition, his connections, his willingness to betray anyone who stood in his way, he had thought those things made him strong. He was wrong. Yuna looked up at the ceiling, imagining the stars beyond, the vast galaxy that did not yet know her name. She would show them all. She would rise so high that the stars themselves would remember what humanity was capable of. And one day, Dohan would understand just how wrong he had been. She took a deep breath and began to walk. Her story was not over. It was only beginning. The mining colony of Dustfall was the kind of place people went to die. It sat on the edge of human space, a forgotten rock orbiting a dying star. The air recyclers wheezed and coughed. The water tasted like metal. The miners who worked there had given up on dreams long ago. This was where Yuna started again. No major research station would take her. No fleet would accept her application. The whispers of her arrest followed her like a shadow, even though the charges had been dismissed. So she took the only job available, a small laboratory on a dying world, studying alien bacteria in soil samples. It was humiliating. It was lonely. It was exactly what she needed. For the first 6 months, she barely spoke to anyone. She threw herself into her work, spending 18 hours a day in her tiny lab, pushing herself until she collapsed from exhaustion. The other colonists thought she was strange. This quiet woman who had appeared from nowhere with haunted eyes and trembling hands. Then the plague came. It started with the children. Fever, then bleeding, then death. The colony doctor, a tired old man named Wubin, had never seen anything like it. Within a week, 40 people were sick. Within 2 weeks, 10 were dead. Yuna recognized the symptoms. She had seen this before in her research, years ago, when she was still respected, still believed in. This was not a natural disease. This was engineered, a biological weapon created by an alien species called the Veth, designed to kill humans slowly and painfully. How did it get here? Wubin asked her, his face gray with exhaustion. They stood in the makeshift hospital, surrounded by the sounds of suffering. Someone brought it, Yuna said. Maybe in a shipment. Maybe deliberately. It does not matter now. What matters is stopping it. Can you? She looked at the dying colonists, at the children crying for their mothers, at the families holding hands and waiting for the end. She thought of Dohan, somewhere far away in his comfortable diplomatic halls, never knowing or caring about places like this. Yes, she said. I can. She worked for 72 hours without sleep. She took samples from the sick, studied the alien bacteria under her microscope, and ran test after test with the limited equipment she had. The Veth had designed this plague to resist human medicine, but they had not accounted for human stubbornness. Yuna found the weakness on the 3rd day. The bacteria needed a specific mineral to reproduce, a mineral found in the colony's water supply. If she could filter that mineral out and introduce a competing organism on one she had found in the local soil, the plague would starve. It was a desperate plan. It should not have worked. But Yuna had spent her whole life doing things that should not work. Within a week, the dying stopped. Within a month, the colony was recovering. The miners who had ignored her now looked at her with something like wonder. The children she had saved followed her around the corridors, bringing her small gifts, a pretty stone, a drawing, a handful of native flowers. Word spread beyond Dustfall. A woman on the edge of human space had stopped an alien plague with nothing but her mind and her will. Military commanders heard the story. Intelligence officers made notes. And eventually, a ship arrived with an offer. The Outer Fleet wanted her. It was not the prestigious United Earth Fleet she had once dreamed of joining. The Outer Fleet was underfunded, understaffed, and constantly outgunned. They protected the frontier colonies that nobody else cared about: the miners, the farmers, the forgotten people who kept humanity alive in the dark spaces between stars. It was perfect. Yuna climbed the ranks faster than anyone expected. Her scientific mind saw patterns that military officers missed. When she analyzed an alien fleet's formation, she did not just see ships, she saw the biology behind the tactics, the cultural assumptions driving the strategy, the psychological weaknesses waiting to be exploited. She developed what became known as the adaptive response doctrine. Instead of meeting alien fleets with equal force, human ships would analyze, adapt, and strike at unexpected angles. It was the way a smaller creature survives against a larger predator, not through strength, but through intelligence. By 2355, she commanded her own vessel, a battered old cruiser named the Persistent. Her crew loved her because she remembered their names, asked about their families, and never sent them into danger she was not willing to face herself. Her enemies feared her because she never attacked where they expected and never retreated when they thought she would. By 2358, she commanded a fleet. The real test came with the Kreth hegemony. The Kreth were insects the size of humans, with armored shells and hive mind coordination that made them terrifying in battle. They had conquered a dozen species and saw humanity as nothing more than soft targets waiting to be harvested. When they launched a surprise assault on 3 human colonies, most military experts believed it was the beginning of the end. They did not know Yuna. The Battle of Varus IV lasted 6 hours. The Kreth fleet outnumbered the human defenders 5-1. Their hive mind allowed them to coordinate with perfect precision, moving as one organism across the battlefield. But Yuna had studied them. For years, she had collected data on Kreth biology, their neural networks, their communication methods. She knew that their commanders, the larger Kreth, who directed the hive mind, were sensitive to specific frequencies of light. Certain patterns could disrupt their connection to the swarm, leaving individual ships confused and vulnerable. She had modified her fleet's weapons to pulse those exact frequencies. When the battle began, the Kreth expected an easy victory. They moved in their perfect formations, their thousands of ships dancing together like a single deadly creature. Then Yuna gave the order, and her fleet opened fire. The light weapons did little physical damage. But across the Kreth fleet, commanders suddenly lost contact with their swarms. Ships that had moved as one now drifted in confusion. Formations fell apart. The perfect coordination became chaos. The human fleet struck hard and fast, cutting through the confused enemy like a blade through water. When it was over, the Kreth had lost 3/4 of their forces. The rest fled into deep space, their invasion broken. Humanity had won, and not through superior numbers or better technology, through understanding, through the uniquely human ability to study an enemy, learn their weaknesses, and adapt. Admiral Yuna stood on the bridge of the Persistent, watching the enemy ships disappear into the darkness. Around her, her crew was cheering, embracing each other, crying with relief and joy. She allowed herself a small smile. A small smile. Far away, in the gleaming halls of the Galactic Consulate, Do-hwan watched the news reports with growing unease. The woman he had thrown away had just done what he had believed impossible. She had made humanity a power to be respected in the galaxy. The aliens around him spoke in hushed, worried tones. They were not discussing trade agreements or cultural exchanges anymore. They were asking each other, what else are the humans capable of? Do-hwan had built his career on being humanity's friendly face, the reasonable one, the one who assured alien species that humans were not threatening. But now, because of Yuna, humans did not need to be friendly anymore. They had proven something much more important. They had proven they could win. In his private quarters that night, Do-hwan pulled out an old photograph. It showed 2 young cadets on graduation day, their whole lives ahead of them. He stared at the woman in the picture, smiling, trusting, full of love, and tried to reconcile her with the legendary admiral who had just changed the course of galactic history. He had thought she was weak. He had thought she needed him. He had been so very wrong. And somewhere deep in his chest, in the place where his heart used to be, Do-hwan felt the first cold fingers of fear. The Galactic Consulate Central was a masterpiece of alien architecture. Crystal towers rose kilometers into a purple sky. Gardens of impossible beauty floated between buildings, held aloft by technology humans could barely understand. Beings from 100 worlds walked its gleaming streets, each one representing civilizations older than human history. Do-hwan had once believed this was where he belonged. Now, walking through those same streets, he felt like a ghost. The change had come slowly at first, Then all at once, after the Battle of Varus 4, everything shifted. The aliens who had once praised him as the reasonable human now looked at him with different eyes. They were not looking at a friendly ambassador anymore. They were looking at a member of a species that had just proven it could defeat a major galactic power. And they were afraid. At first, Do-won tried to use this new fear to his advantage. He told himself that fear could be just as useful as friendship. But he quickly discovered the truth. The aliens did not want to deal with him at all anymore. They wanted to talk to the people who actually mattered, the military leaders, the scientists, the heroes who had earned humanity's new reputation. They wanted people like Yuna. The meetings that once filled his schedule began to empty. Diplomats who had sought his company now avoided him. When major decisions were made, he learned about them afterward, if at all. He had become what he had always feared most, irrelevant. But the worst part was the other humans. Word had spread about what he had done to Yuna. At first it was just whispers. Rumors passed between embassy staff and visiting officers. Then it became more. Other human diplomats stopped inviting him to gatherings. Military personnel looked at him with barely hidden contempt. He was the man who had betrayed one of humanity's greatest heroes, and no one would let him forget it. Do-won spent more and more time alone in his quarters, drinking expensive alien wine and staring at the walls. He told himself that they were jealous, that they did not understand the sacrifices necessary for power, that history would prove him right. But in the quiet hours of the night, when there was no one to lie to, he knew the truth. He had given up everything for nothing. The Kreth hegemony contacted him 6 months after their defeat at Varus 4. At first, Do-won deleted their messages without reading them. He was desperate, but not that desperate. Then the invitations stopped completely. Then the consulate reduced his office space. Then they reassigned his staff until he had no one left. On the darkest night of his life, alone in a small room that had once been a storage closet, Do-won opened the Kreth message. They wanted intelligence. They wanted to know about human fleet movements, military technology, defensive positions. They wanted to understand the species that had humiliated them, and they were willing to pay for that understanding. Do-won stared at the message for a long time. He thought about Yuna, commanding fleets, winning battles, building a legacy that would outlast both of them. He thought about the respect she had earned, the love her crew showed her, the purpose that drove her forward. All the things he had wanted, all the things he had thrown away. If he could not have power through diplomacy, perhaps he could have it through secrets. If the aliens would not respect him, perhaps they would fear him. If he could not be a hero, perhaps he could be something else entirely. His hands trembled as he typed his response. The meetings with Kreth agents happened in dark corners of the station, in places where security cameras did not reach. Do-won passed them data chips containing fleet patrol schedules, sensor network gaps, supply route timings. Each piece of information was small, but together they painted a picture the Kreth could use. For a few months, Do-won felt powerful again. He had a secret. He was important. The Kreth treated him with the respect he craved, even if that respect was built on betrayal. He did not know that Yuna's intelligence network was watching. The woman he had betrayed had built the finest information-gathering operation in human space. Her agents were everywhere in trading posts, on diplomatic stations, even in the consulate itself. They watched for threats to humanity, and they found one in the most unexpected place. When the report reached Yuna's desk, she sat in silence for a long time. Do-won. Of course, it was Do-won. He had betrayed her once for power, and now he was betraying all of humanity for the same reason. Part of her had always known it would end this way. A man who would destroy one person for ambition would eventually destroy anyone who stood in his path. The disease in his soul had simply spread until there was nothing left. She could have handled it quietly. She could have sent a quiet message to consulate security, let them deal with him, kept her name out of it. No one would have blamed her for wanting to stay far away from the man who had ruined her life. But that was not who Yuna was. She flagged the intelligence report, added her own analysis, and sent it through official channels. If Doan was going to fall, it would be in the light, not in shadows. Everyone would know exactly what he had done and why. The consulate security team arrested him in his quarters at midnight. He was still wearing his diplomatic robes, still clutching a data chip containing the latest batch of stolen secrets. When they broke down his door, he did not run or fight. He simply stood there, looking at the officers with an expression of profound exhaustion. In his hand, they found the old photograph. Two young cadets on graduation day, before everything went wrong. They searched his quarters and found evidence of months of communication with the Kreth hegemony. They found payment records showing deposits to secret accounts. They found a journal filled with bitter complaints about how the galaxy had treated him unfairly, how Yuna had stolen the glory that should have been his, how everyone would be sorry when they realized how important he truly was. The trial was brief. The evidence was overwhelming. The consulate did not want the embarrassment of a human traitor in their midst, so they were happy to hand him over to Earth authorities. When the ship carrying Doan back to Earth passed through the sector where Yuna's fleet was stationed, she watched it on her tactical display. A small transport, carrying the man who had once meant everything to her, now reduced to a prisoner heading home to face justice. Captain Jisoo stood beside her on the bridge. You could have let someone else handle this. No one would have judged you. Yuna shook her head slowly. He was selling information that got people killed. 847 people died in that Kreth raid last month. Colonists. Children. They died because of the intelligence he provided. I know. But it must still be difficult. Yuna watched the transport until it disappeared from her sensors. She thought about the young man she had loved, the dreams they had shared, the future they had planned together. All of it ashes now. The difficult part was years ago, she said quietly, when he walked out that door and left me to face the consequences of his ambition alone. Everything since then has just been watching him become what he always was. And what was that? Yuna turned away from the display and looked at her friend with tired eyes. Empty. He was always empty inside. He just needed power to fill the void. And when he could not get it honestly, he took it any way he could. She paused. I think I knew that, even back then. I just loved him too much to see it. Jisoo put a hand on her shoulder. What happens now? Now he faces a military tribunal. And then he faces whatever justice the courts decide. Will you testify? Yuna was quiet for a long moment. The stars wheeled slowly outside the viewports, ancient and indifferent to human drama. They have asked me to, but I have not decided yet. You do not owe him anything. No, Yuna agreed. I do not. But I owe something to myself, and I am still figuring out what that is. She straightened her uniform and turned back to her duties. There was always more work to do, more battles to plan, more people to protect. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a question lingered. When she finally faced him again, what would she say? The Sol Orbital Complex floated above the Korean peninsula like a steel flower, its petals reaching toward the stars. Inside its central hub, the United Earth military prison held the most dangerous criminals humanity had ever produced. Terrorists, war criminals, traitors, and now, Doan. Yuna's shuttle docked at the prison's secure bay on a cold Tuesday morning. She had spent the journey reading through the tribunal records, the evidence files, the psychological evaluations. She had watched video of his arrest, his interrogation, his hollow-eyed confession. She had seen everything except the man himself. 12 years. It had been 12 years since he walked out of their quarters and left her to face the consequences of his betrayal. 12 years since she had picked herself up from the floor and begun the long climb to where she stood today. She was not sure she was ready to see him. Captain Jisoo walked beside her through the security checkpoints. You can still turn back. No one would blame you. I would blame myself. Yuna handed her identification to the guard and waited while they scanned her credentials. If I run from this, I run from everything. I need to face him. I need to close this chapter. And then I move forward. Like I always have. The corridors of the prison were cold and gray, lit by harsh white lights that left no shadows. Yuna walked past row after row of cells, each one containing someone who had committed terrible acts against humanity. Some of them watched her pass with empty eyes. Others turned away, ashamed. Do-won's cell was at the end of the highest security wing. 2 guards stood outside, their faces professionally blank. They saluted when they saw Yuna's uniform, her medals, the rank insignia that marked her as one of humanity's greatest heroes. Admiral, the tribunal requested your testimony. We were told you might visit the prisoner first. Yes. Yuna looked at the closed door. Open it, please. Are you sure you want to go in alone? We can provide an escort. I have faced alien fleets and galactic empires. I think I can handle one man in a cell. The guards exchanged glances but said nothing. The door slid open. The cell was small and bare. A metal bed bolted to the wall. A toilet in the corner. A single light that never turned off. And sitting on the bed, his head in his hands, was Do-won. He had aged terribly. The handsome young man she had loved was gone, replaced by a hollow shell with gray in his hair and deep lines around his eyes. His diplomatic robes had been replaced by a plain prisoner uniform. His perfect posture had become a permanent slump. When the door opened, he did not look up. He was used to guards coming and going, meals delivered and removed, the mechanical routine of prison life. Hello, Do-won. His head snapped up. His eyes, those eyes that had once charmed everyone they looked upon, went wide with shock. For a moment, he simply stared at her, as if he could not believe what he was seeing. Then something in him broke. He fell off the bed, landing hard on his knees on the cold floor. Tears streamed down his face as he crawled toward her, his hands reaching out like a drowning man grasping for a rope. Yuna, please. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I did not know. I did not understand. She stood still, watching him collapse at her feet. 12 years of pain, 12 years of climbing from the ashes he had made of her life. 12 years of proving that humanity's strength came not from politics, but from perseverance. All of it had led to this moment. And she felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Just a great, hollow sadness. You did not understand what? She asked quietly. He looked up at her, his face a mask of desperation. You, humanity, everything. His voice cracked and broke. The aliens, they never respected me. They laughed at me behind my back. I thought I was building something, but I was just a joke to them. A pet human who made them feel comfortable. I know. But you, he choked on a sob. You made them fear us. You made them admire us. You showed them what we really are. And I was so blind. I thought power came from their approval, from being close to them, from being accepted. But you showed them that power comes from us, from inside us. Yuna knelt down to his level. Their faces were close now, closer than they had been in over a decade. She could smell the despair on him, the sour sweat of sleepless nights and endless regret. You did not just abandon me, Do-won. You abandoned yourself. You abandoned everything that makes us human: loyalty, love, the will to stand for each other even when it is hard. She paused, choosing her words carefully. That is why you failed. And that is why we won. I was so stupid. He was sobbing now, great ugly sobs that shook his whole body. I threw away everything that mattered for things that meant nothing. I had love, and I traded it for approval from beings who would never truly accept me. I had you, and He could not finish. He simply wept, his forehead pressed to the cold floor. Yuna watched him for a long moment. This was not the confrontation she had imagined in her darkest nights. There was no shouting, no dramatic accusations, no chance to tell him exactly how much he had hurt her. There was just a broken man crying on the floor of her prison cell, destroyed by the weight of his own choices. She could have hated him. Part of her had hated him for years. But hate was heavy, and she had carried too much already. She reached out and touched his head, gently, the way one might comfort a child. I forgave you years ago, she said. I had to so I could become who I was meant to be. I could not carry the weight of hating you and also climb as high as I needed to climb. So I let it go. He looked up at her, his eyes red and swollen. How? How could you forgive me? Because forgiveness is not about the person who hurt you. It is about freeing yourself. She stood up, looking down at him with an expression he could not read. You could not hold me back, Do-hwan. Nothing could. You thought you destroyed my career, but you actually freed me to build something greater. You thought you were eliminating a threat to your ambition, but you were actually setting me on the path to becoming who I truly was. I know that now. His voice was barely a whisper. I see it so clearly now. Too late. Yes, too late for you. She stepped back toward the door. I will not speak against you at the tribunal. Your actions will condemn you without my help. But I want you to understand something before I go. He looked up at her, desperate for any word of comfort, any hint of mercy. I became who I am not despite what you did to me, but because of it. Every time I wanted to give up, I remembered your betrayal, and I pushed harder. Every time I faced an impossible challenge, I thought about the moment you walked out that door, and I found strength I did not know I had. She paused. You tried to destroy me, and instead you helped create humanity's greatest champion. History will remember what you did, Do-hwan, but not the way you hoped. She turned and walked to the door. Yuna, wait. He struggled to his feet, reaching for her. Please, I have nothing left. No family, no friends, no future. All I have are memories of what I threw away. Please, tell me there is something. Some way to make it right. She stopped at the doorway, but did not turn around. You cannot make it right with me. That chance is gone. But the 847 people who died because of your intelligence, their families deserve to know you are sorry. When you face the tribunal, do not make excuses. Do not blame anyone else. Just admit what you did and accept the consequences. That is the only thing you can do now. And then, after the tribunal, after the sentence, will I ever see you again? Yuna finally turned. She looked at the broken man who had once been her everything, and she allowed herself to feel the last faint echo of what they had shared. Goodbye, Do-hwan. The door closed behind her. The guards escorted her back to her shuttle. Captain Jisoo was waiting, her face full of concern. Are you all right? Yuna thought about the question. She thought about the crying man in the cell, the years of pain and struggle, the journey from disgrace to glory. She thought about all the people she had saved, all the battles she had won, all the moments when she had proven that humanity was more than one man's betrayal. Yes, she said finally. I think I am. She walked up the ramp into her shuttle, leaving the prison behind. She did not look back. 10 years had passed since Yuna walked out of that prison cell. 10 years of battles and treaties, of pushing humanity higher and farther than anyone had thought possible. And now, on a warm spring morning on Earth, she stood before the greatest audience of her life. The Treaty of Common Stars was about to be signed. The old United Nations building in Geneva had been restored for this historic moment. Representatives from 12 alien species sat in the Grand Assembly Hall, their translators humming softly as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Thousands of cameras broadcast the event to every corner of human space and beyond. Una stood at the central podium, wearing her dress uniform with its rows of medals and honors. She was older now, her hair touched with silver, but her eyes still held the same fire that had carried her from disgrace to glory. She looked out at the assembled beings, Insectoid Kreth, Crystalline Veth, Towering Nomar, and dozens of others, and thought about how far humanity had come. Not so long ago, they had looked at humans as children, as primitives, as easy targets. Now they sat as equals, ready to sign a treaty that would make humanity a founding pillar of galactic civilization. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice carrying across the vast hall. "I know that for many of you, this moment was unimaginable a generation ago. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage. We were small, isolated, and often dismissed. Some of you thought we would be conquered. Others thought we would simply fade away, another failed species in the long history of the stars." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "We humans have a saying, fall 7 times, stand up 8. It means that no matter how many times life knocks us down, we get back up. We keep fighting. We never surrender to despair." The alien representatives listened intently. Some leaned forward in their seats. Others exchanged glances with their colleagues. This was not the speech they had expected. "We were dismissed," Una continued. "We were underestimated. We were betrayed sometimes by others, sometimes by our own. But every fall taught us to rise stronger. Every defeat showed us what we needed to change. Every betrayal reminded us what truly matters." She thought of Dawan briefly. He had died in prison 2 years ago, alone and forgotten. The news had reached her during a diplomatic mission to the outer systems. She had paused, said a quiet prayer for the soul of the man she had once loved, and then continued with her work. That was all the time she could give him. That was all he had left her. "Today, we do not ask for your respect," she said, her voice growing stronger. "We have earned it through blood and sacrifice, through battles won and disasters overcome. We do not seek your permission. We have proven our worth on 100 battlefields and in 1,000 laboratories. We do not come here as supplicants hoping for acceptance." She raised her head high. "We offer instead our hand in partnership. Not because we need you, but because we choose you. Because cooperation is stronger than conquest. Because friendship is more lasting than fear. Because that is who we are, a species that will never stop fighting for a better tomorrow." The hall was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the representatives began to react. The Kreth clicked their mandibles in approval. The Veth pulsed with gentle light. The Nomar bowed their massive heads. One by one, species that had once looked down on humanity acknowledged the truth of her words. Humanity was not a junior member of the galactic community anymore. Humanity was a leader. The signing ceremony took hours. Each species had its own rituals, its own traditions. Una moved through them all with patience and grace, her hand steady as she added humanity's signature to the Treaty of Common Stars. When it was finally over, when the cameras stopped recording and the diplomats began to mingle, Una slipped away to a quiet balcony overlooking the old city. The sun was setting over Geneva, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Captain Jisoo found her there, as she always did. "That was one hell of a speech," Jisoo said, leaning against the railing beside her. "I think you made the Kreth ambassador cry. I did not even know they had tear ducts. Yuna smiled. They have vestigial ones. I read about it in a xenobiology paper years ago. Of course you did. Jisoo was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset. You are thinking about him, are you not, Dawan? Yuna considered denying it, but what was the point? Jisoo knew her too well. I am thinking about what he taught me. Not the betrayal. The lesson beneath it. What lesson? Yuna turned to her oldest friend, her companion through decades of war and peace, and smiled gently. That our greatest strength was never our technology or our tactics or even our resilience. It is that we choose each other. Again and again, even when it is hard. Even when we are hurt. Even when every logical argument says we should give up on love and loyalty and just look out for ourselves. She looked back at the sunset. That is why we will always rise. That is why the galaxy will remember us. Jisoo nodded slowly. He never understood that, did he? Dohwan, I mean. He thought power came from connections and influence and clever politics. He never realized it came from something much simpler. No, he never did. Yuna felt a moment of genuine sadness for the man who had shared her youth. He spent his whole life chasing something that was already inside him. All he had to do was choose it. Choose loyalty. Choose love. Choose to stand with others instead of climbing over them. But he could never see that. The emptiness inside him made him blind. And you? I almost fell into the same trap, Yuna admitted. After he betrayed me, I was so angry. I wanted to prove him wrong, to become so powerful that he would have to acknowledge his mistake. I wanted revenge, but you changed. I grew. Yuna watched as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. Somewhere on Dustfall, surrounded by dying colonists and broken equipment, I realized that success was not about proving anything to anyone. It was about becoming the person I wanted to be, helping the people I could help, building something that would outlast me. She turned away from the sunset and looked back at the building where history had just been made. Dawan wanted to be remembered, and he will be as a traitor and a failure. I never wanted to be remembered at all. I just wanted to do what was right. And somehow, that made all the difference. Jisoo put a hand on her shoulder. What happens now? You have achieved everything. The war is over. The treaty is signed. Humanity is respected across the galaxy. What is left for you to do? Yuna smiled, and for a moment, she looked like the young woman she had been so many years ago, before the betrayal, before the pain, before the long climb to the stars. Now I teach. I find the next generation of leaders, the young people with fire in their hearts and steel in their spines, and I help them become who they are meant to be. I make sure that when I am gone, humanity does not lose what we have built. She started walking back toward the building, toward her duty, toward her future. And I make sure that no one ever forgets the real lesson of my life, which is, Yuna stopped at the door and looked back at her friend. That they thought we were weak because we loved. They thought our attachments made us vulnerable, our loyalty made us exploitable, our compassion made us soft. They were wrong. Her eyes shone with quiet pride. We are strong because we love, because we choose each other, because we never stop reaching for something better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. She pushed open the door, and light spilled out across the balcony. That is what it means to be human. And that is why the stars will remember us. She walked back into the building, back to the celebration of humanity's greatest triumph. Jisoo watched her go, smiling softly. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. They hung there like promises, like possibilities, like the countless worlds that humanity would one day call home. Far below, in the streets of Geneva, people were celebrating. They did not know all the details of what had brought them to this moment. The betrayals, the battles, the broken hearts that had paved the road to the stars. They only knew that humanity had done something impossible. They had risen. And somewhere among those stars, in the vast darkness between worlds, the legacy of Yuna was just beginning. Her name would be taught in schools, celebrated in songs, remembered in the stories that parents told their children on 100 different planets. But she would have said that her name did not matter. What mattered was the lesson. That humanity's greatest strength would never be found in weapons or technology or clever politics. It would always be found in each other. And as long as humans remembered that, they would never truly fall. The end.